Inmendham, well, I'm Piero. Inmendham, you are very rude. You were not going to spend a year trying to convince me of anything, no matter whether you intended to or not. You were the one that brought up the idea that you studied physics in school as a student, and there was no random particles, so obviously there was no room. I mean, you made the argument for me that because you said there was no room when you looked down there closely, and there is room for randomness. You want to act like, but in this practical world we don't see quantum effects. I think we do, and also we can capture those effects. It's like saying magnetism isn't real because, atoms can't be little, magnets because, look, this isn't a magnet and it's made of atoms, but they're not aligned, you see. But we can make magnets even though they're rare in nature if it's possible. We can magnify randomness in a lot of ways. And as far as quantum effects in general, what about glass? It's like the quantum effect that light can pass through a solid object. It's a quantum effect here in the real practical world. And even though you don't find glass just occurring on its own that often, there's a lot of it about now. Geiger counter. You just don't know this physics as well as you think, evidently. A Geiger counter goes click, click, click every time a photon strikes its detector. Click from the radiation. You cannot predict the pattern of those clicks. You cannot. It's not because you can't look close enough. The theory is fundamentally you can't predict that. But even more bizarre, the theory seems to be that it comes off at all. The photon comes off of the radioactive material at all the possible moments. Yeah, so that's a bit strange as well. That might be a way for you to get your little determinism back, because it might be that everything that's possible happens. And we for some reason are weaving through just one set of contiguous possibilities, but they're all actually happening. You've made your conclusion. You said you'll make a prediction. You've acknowledged more or less that there is randomness in quantum physics because it's undeniable. It's not a subtle part of quantum physics. Every particle is a little packet of probability. It doesn't exist in a particular location. It's spread out until it interacts with some other wave packet. Your animal example makes no sense. A duck is a duck, but every duck is individual. That's the randomness. Why would we want 1% of randomness with 99% predictability? Because that 1% is what mixes things up. That's how you mix the solution so the chemicals can even come in contact and you can have these predictable reactions in the first place. There's room for individuality. There's room for differentiation. You constantly talk about us thinking, and I don't know what you're talking about. There is no thinking if there's no free will. You're just water flowing downhill. Maybe the river thinks it decides which way to flow. You're totally wrong about not being able to see stuff. We can use technology to see stuff. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because have you heard of the tunneling microscope? I mean, it used to be when I was a kid, we thought, we'll never get a picture of an atom because you can't hit it with light, electrons, other particles. Well, it turns out, see, in classical mechanics, you have an electron bound to a molecule or an atom of some sort, and if you pull on it, if you don't pull hard enough, it won't come. It's bound by a certain amount of force, basically, that it has to be put into the system to pull that, to free that electron. Well, it turns out, since it's not a particle, that it's a little wave packet, a particle you'd have to pull strong enough or it won't go through the barrier. But a wave, it bumps against the barrier, makes the barrier vibrate, basically. And part of the wave will go through. So, since it's a probability wave, that's a probability that it's just going to jump past the threshold with an insufficient amount of energy to do so. built a device based on that, and lo and behold, it worked. Because there is randomness in the universe. At least you have to give up this idea that physics doesn't support randomness. Of course it supports randomness. Of course. And furthermore, what is it about you guys that don't believe in free will? Why? Why do you want to give up? See, I believe it's important to fight for our freedom. So I'm not into giving up on the idea of will. Now, free will, sure, I'm not sure that freedom is the right term, because there is no totally free will. There is no totally unfree will. There's limits, yeah. When you are a duck, then you're limited to what a duck can be. You don't speak English. If you're a human, you don't have wings. But there's freedoms within that bracket. And this is just like the wave packet of a particle. The electron doesn't exist in a particular location. It exists somewhere within a packet of probability. Underneath that is 100% probability. It's in there somewhere. And it's not at any of the places with 0 probability. But it's spread out. There's an interval of free will. Statistically, there are patterns to how much radiation will be radiated by a radioactive substance. Its half-life, half of its energy should be radiated. But it won't be exactly at the halfway point. And you can't tell when or what color photons exactly will come out, though you can determine the limited selection, the limited set of possibilities of what they'll be. But not exactly. We have a constrained freedom, which we are either strong enough to overcome or not strong enough. Another way to put it is that some of the contexts we will be able to overcome and some we will not. Your criticism of free will falls really flat, and your idea that you could spend a year and suss out, you're making predictions about physics that is not going to be solved in the coming year. You think maybe that'd be a bigger factor than if you could figure out what I'm missing. Well, it's not that I can't picture determinism. I do picture it. I think there is determinism to a certain degree, but it's not from now to the end of eternity. It's with little segments, and it's punctuated with noticeable moments of will, and I think we can insert moments of will in some of those predetermined segments as well. But sometimes, whether we like it or not, a moment of will comes, and it's as if nature asks us, what you gonna do? You could call it faith, but I've experienced these moments. I believe that is will. But is it a belief? No. It's a definition. I exist, I have an experience, and I name the experience will. Okay, so will exists. We're only asking, what's the nature? How constrained is it? Is it totally constrained? You haven't made a case that it is. You said there were no random particles, and that convinced you young about determinism. Well, you should rethink that, because you were wrong. The little stuff on nature, you know what? Nature has positive things about it too. It's not all garbage too, just like you said about society. Anyway, you need not talk to me for even 1 minute. But if you're gonna take the bravado that you could prove something, I don't think you've earned that, and you haven't earned any of the bravado about what a waste of time it would be. You don't understand the issue. You're not using a consistent set of reasons. I think there are ulterior motives to trying to cut down the will.